Before we get into this week's episode, I want to make a plug for Art Market Minute. This is ArtNet News' new micro-podcast hosted by Margaret Kerrigan, who's the site's news editor Europe. It offers a weekly snapshot of essential art market news, expertly compiled by the ArtNet Pro editorial team. The world is very broken right now. People are in a lot of pain and therefore open to all kinds of explanations for that pain. I think you got to take this stuff seriously.
Hi. I'm Andrew Goldstein, and this is The Art Angle, a podcast from ArtNet News where the art world meets the real world, bringing each week's biggest story down to earth. This week, the story we're going to delve into is a bizarre one, and we're doing so with a good deal of trepidation. That's because it involves a colossal conspiracy theory germinated in the dark corners of the far-right internet whose toxic tentacles spread everywhere, from Bill Gates to a ring of supposed Satanists who rule Hollywood, all the way to the power brokers and, yes, the pizza parlors of Washington, D.C. The only reason we're diving into this miasma is because it just so happens to also involve one of the most prominent contemporary artists alive, Marina Abramović. For people in the art world, Abramović needs no introduction, but here goes anyway. A 72-year-old Serbian-born performance artist, Abramović won the 1997 Golden Lion for Best Artist at the Venice Biennale, and since then has become the single most famous performance artist in the world, known for pushing her body to the limit with punishing, occult-infused pieces that toy with life, death, and the spirit world. 10 years ago, she changed the course of art history when her MoMA show The Artist is Present drew blockbuster crowds, at once moving performance art from the fringes to a central spot in the culture, where she has since done these high-profile collaborations with stars like Jay-Z and Lady Gaga. So how did she get dragged into a far-right conspiracy theory? It's complicated. Luckily, ArtNet News chief art critic Ben Davis has done the hard work of deciphering the situation for an article that just may change the way you think about conspiracy theories. I'm happy to have him back on the show. So thanks very much for coming back on The Art Angle again, Ben.
Well, I've got nowhere else to go except down the rabbit hole.
Well, that's the attitude. Okay. What is it that set you off on this whole investigation?
Well, this is actually a sideline I have, I guess, because in recent years, these emerging internet conspiracy theories have been one way that contemporary art has been part of the political discourse. And that's been a theme going on at least 5 years. But the immediate incident was on April 10th, Microsoft released an ad online, a promo for their HoloLens 2 mixed reality headset, which is augmented reality gear that you put on that allows you to see digital objects, digital events mixed in with real life. And they released this promotional video that starred the performance artist Marina Abramović. And it was a promotion for a work that she'd done called The Life, which uses the mixed reality technology, and actually was a cross promotion with Christie's Auction House, where it was going to be the first mixed reality work of art sold at auction. And this advertisement promotional video immediately touched off a lot of controversy in internet conspiracy circles and was downvoted massively on YouTube. Actually, the negative reaction became so intense that Microsoft actually removed the video from the internet, which threw more fuel on the fire in a way.
Wow.
It's pretty remarkable that the reaction would be that powerful to make this huge Seattle software company actually react to it.
So who were these people who were driving the backlash to the Abramović video?
Well, it's hard to say. It's like a lot of things that happen on the internet. It has this very mysterious, decentralized origin. But Marina Abramović has become a figure, a very symbolic figure in certain kinds of conspiracy circles, to the point where her presence in this video immediately drew attention on Reddit threads and so on. And then all this was amplified by Alex Jones's InfoWars site, the very popular alternative news channel that I'm sure people know is very controversial and extremely, extremely influential, including with our president. Jones himself has, been sued in the past for amplifying different kinds of conspiracy theories. He actually had to go to court himself to defend spreading untruths and rumor, where he infamously claimed that he himself was like a performance artist. That was part of his defense of himself, and is interestingly very clear in what he says now that he didn't start the fire. His site is not the first to take aim at this Microsoft promotional ad, although he is very clear that he does believe that Marina Abramović is the high priestess of the Church of Aleister Crowley, meaning the Church of Satan, and that he is fully co-signing the theory that she is a symbol of evil and needs to be taken down. One other thing I'd mention is that it is not incidental that Microsoft, the company here, that's very important to this theory that Bill Gates, in this current terrible moment we're in, has also become a very important symbolic figure in certain kinds of fantasies about the evil cabal controlling the world. He is the world's richest man, and he has been very involved through his charity work in public health causes. And so in anti-vaccine circles, which intersect heavily with conspiracy theory circles, he was trying to get everybody injected with some sort of mark of the beast. So when Microsoft and Marina Abramović came together for this one ad, it really is kind of the perfect storm for people who believe in this particular theory.
Okay, so we're going to try to shine a light on this fantasy that's affecting the art world. But before we get into that, we should point out that dealing with conspiracy theories is a little bit like getting into a tar pit. It's very hard to extricate yourself from it, and it also risks just creating more attention around it. But you have a simple formula for when it's okay and when it's not okay to engage with an internet conspiracy theory. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. The simplest answer is that these things actually do move a lot of people. Roger Stone, who is a very influential figure in politics in the President Trump circles, has appeared on InfoWars, and he has specifically said, you may not think much of Alex Jones's audience, but there are a lot of them, and they vote, so it's worth paying attention to. But there is always a risk that the outlandishness of various kinds of claims you pick up on the internet are the vector of infection. So I think that a very simple formula or metric that I use is if something is already being talked about by more people than would read your commentary on it, then it's fair game. And actually, you should engage with it. And if not, then you should not engage with it. It's simply a matter of whether you're amplifying something that is insignificant simply because you're hungry for the attention that would bring you, or whether or not you assess that it is something that actually merits serious discussion. And in this case, I think it's indisputable that this Marina Abramović New World Order conspiracy is something that very seriously shapes the public discourse about her artwork at this point.
All right, that said, you started looking into this thing and you put on your detective hat and got your magnifying lens. What did you find?
Well, I was aware that Marina Abramović had become a sort of symbol for the online conspiracy community. I guess I wasn't aware of the depth of the investment in her. And a little bit of fishing led me to this video called Out of Shadows. That was actually posted, again, in a terrible coincidence, I think, the exact same day that the Microsoft ad was posted. So it was this, by the time I had seen it, which was about a week later, after this controversy had already forced the Microsoft video offline, I think something like 7 million people had seen this online documentary and another 2 million over the weekend. I think that it's a legitimate internet phenomenon that's to be taken seriously. This is a documentary that looks at the theory that a secret cabal of Satanists are collaborating with the deep state to control Hollywood and entertainment. And it almost climaxes with the revelation that Marina Abramović is a puppet mistress behind it all. Not exactly the center of the conspiracy, but very close to it.
So in the art world, it should be pointed out that Marina is known as a warm, lovely person with a great sense of humor who's a joy to be around. But for those who are unfamiliar with the unconventional ways of the art world, she could seem a little bit unusual. She favors long flowing gowns. She lives in a house that is shaped like a star. She's often used skeletons, bones, and blood and nudity in her work. She once lay down in a gasoline-soaked pentagram and set it on fire. She works in this endurance mode that is really meant to push her body to the limit. This is kind of strange to somebody who doesn't know her work and is coming to it for the first time. How do you explain her whole approach?
Marina Abramović is not an extraordinary character to people who are immersed in art. And performance art is notoriously exhibitionist, involved in bringing in lots of different elements to different kinds of world rituals. So what she does isn't extraordinary. But not everybody loves Marina Abramović, And particularly her post-2010 period, after she sort of became this media figure, there are plenty of people in the art world who look at that and think that she's sort of crossed over into some sort of more lowbrow, kind of sensationalistic phase of her career, that turn up their nose at it, think that there's plenty of more serious performance art, less sensationalistic performance art. There are legit criticisms of her. That's all I'm saying.
So, this is not the first time that people have kind of been suspicious of the themes in Abramović's work, and she's gotten protested in the past by some religious fundamentalists, and she's deliberately playing with this occult aesthetic. She's very adamant that this is not Satanism. She's really, for a long time, she's resisted even talking about this because she didn't want to, throw fuel on the fire. But recently, after the Microsoft controversy, what did she say about these kind of accusations against her?
Well, she said, I'm not a Satanist. And anybody who actually is familiar with my work, who reads my biography, reads what I've said about my work, will understand that. I've read her biography. I've talked to her biographer, James Westcott, for my piece. He points out, she draws on a lot of different world traditions in her art, usually in a kind of irreverent way. I will say that it's a little futile to, and maybe even aside the point, to debate the specific references in this or that work. If you look at something like Spirit Cooking, which is a 1990s performance that's been posted online that is cited as Exhibit A in the fact that she's a not-so-secret Satanist. It contains satanic imagery. It involves painting on the wall with animal blood. And it is a little bit futile to deny the fact that it has sinister imagery in it, right? That's part of the point. What makes it futile to debate is that for the people who are most invested in these kinds of conspiracies, there is a heavy religious component. Mm-hmm. And we're really talking about two ways of looking at symbols that just don't line up. There is no conversation between them. The entire fundamentalist movement in religion comes from a pamphlet series called The Fundamentals. It started in 1910. So it's like, for us who are invested in art history and art theory, that's like classical high modern period. This is not a deep, goes back to time immemorial phenomenon. Fundamentalism is a religious theory that emerges in the modernist period. And it is essentially opposed to symbolic interpretations of the Bible. So if you have a literal interpretation of what happened in the Bible as being true in a historical, real sense, and that is the fundamental symbolic way that you view the world, then you're going to look at images of crucifixes and pentagrams and the kinds of things you see in art, and you're going to interpret them literally. And that, of course, is not how I look at things. Most people who are involved in the art world look at things, where people are constantly taking symbols, giving them new meanings, reprocessing them out of their histories, appropriating them in various kinds of ways, and so on.
So you mentioned spirit cooking, and that seems to be the thing that has linked Marina in the minds of these conspiracy theorists to what is possibly the weirdest conspiracy theory of modern times, Pizzagate. How does that work?
Right. Well, actually, this is where Marina Abramović emerges, I think, as a key symbolic node in these things. That during the 2016 election battle between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, when WikiLeaks released a trove of emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta, in there was a single reference, an email from John Podesta's brother, Tony Podesta, who's a very powerful power broker in Washington, D.C., and an art collector of some renown, asking him if he wanted to go to a spirit cooking performance from Marina Abramović. And that was seized upon and immediately became used as proof that John Podesta, and by extension Hillary Clinton, were part of satanic rituals.
I mean, so you mentioned Tony Podesta, and he would make a pretty attractive satanic character because he moves in these shadowy circles of power as a lobbyist in Washington. He works with major companies, Democrats, Republicans, dictators without having any evident moral scruples. He likes to wear red, and his art collection is actually famously disturbing.
Shoot, his own brother, John Podesta, remarked that Tony Podesta's art collection was pretty out there.
How would you describe his taste in art?
Well, I mean, kind of Ubermensch chic. This is a guy who likes to shock people. And that really came back to bite him once he got caught up in this conspiracy theory.
If you go on the internet and look up the Heather and Tony Podesta art collection, what you actually find is a whole slew of these Pizzagate articles containing pretty freaky artworks, some of which have children in highly compromised positions. You know, it's really pretty disturbing stuff. But the thing is that these are not actually artworks in their collection. How do you explain what's going on here with these images?
Well, I mean, I think it's not that hard to find artworks that are shocking to certain sensibilities. And Tony Podesta very specifically collected artwork that made people unsettled. The prize piece of artwork in his collection is a photo work by Sam Taylor Wood, who's a famous young British artist, and that depicted a nude Jesus Christ that he kept in center of his living room everywhere he went. And there's a very funny anecdote about, he was connected with Hillary Clinton and her coming over and just trying really hard not to be photographed with it because it would look so bad. So that, there's full awareness that this stuff was weird. It sort of makes you feel like if people are coming into the presence of your weird art collection, then you have a certain kind of power over them. But again, this is kind of already at 3 or 4 removes from the central thrust here. This guy, Tony Podesta, was a patron of Marina Abramović. He supported her failed attempt to build a Marina Abramović Institute in Hudson, New York through Kickstarter. And the spirit cooking dinner that became such a smoking gun for people was a prize offered for people who gave over $10,000. He invited his brother to that event. There's no real suggestion that his brother took up the invitation. He was, after all, busy with a lot of other things. And, well, it's easy to talk about how this or that artwork in the collection looks unsettling. There are also a lot of artworks in the collection that are more innocuous and familiar to people. But again, there's not really a lot of point debating specific works of art.
In your essay, you come to a very interesting realization about this whole conspiracy theory that actually turned everything on its head. What did you realize?
Well, this isn't necessarily a realization I came to through it. It's a reflection that I came to about thinking about what it means to write about it in the first place, because I do think you have to be pretty delicate about writing it. Like I said, I think that it's fair game and even something that is useful to explain to people, because various kinds of conspiracy theories are animating people to protest right now. The world is very broken right now. People are in a lot of pain and therefore open to all kinds of explanations for that pain. I think you got to take this stuff seriously. But at the same time, there is a lot of study about how not to write about conspiracy theories, that there is a lot of writing about how the debunking of them possibly amplifies them. The kind of article that looks at these things and just points out how ridiculous they are is more about flattering the ego of the kind of people who don't believe it and appreciate reading something that makes them feel better about how sane and rational they are. But then again, that's not the average person who's like looking at these things. There's a huge mass of people who are just very confused and are just looking for explanations in the world. And these kinds of conspiracies tend to pick up various real insights about how broken the world is, and connect with people, sense that the world is unfair and rigged. Our government really did lie its way into a war in Iraq that broke a lot of people. The very small group of super powerful bankers really did crash the world economy 12 years ago and got away with it with impunity. And to a certain extent, the kind of tendency of the punditry to look at these kind of conspiracy theories and just say, neener, this is so stupid. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're dismissing the idea the world is broken, that there's sinister stuff going on. And so by drawing the line in the way it does, this stuff tends, I think, to push people over in that camp because they feel like some things that are very deeply felt and have a lot of truth in them are being treated as silly ideas.
I mean, I think it's interesting that this comes out of Hollywood because Hollywood famously treats actual themes in fictional constructs in these movies that they create. And you look at something like The Dark Knight Rises, and it's a parable about the surveillance state. And the surveillance state, does exist. Is there a Caped Crusader named Bruce Wayne who lost his parents in a tragic crime and became the Batman? No, there isn't. That's a fiction. But the fact of the government surveilling people and using that for their own purpose is true.
Yeah, in the movie Out of Shadows itself, it's effective because it centers around a real human story, which is there are these two stuntmen who've worked on a lot of famous movies that people identify as things that they've watched and enjoyed. Well, it ends with Marina Abramović as the Queen of Darkness. It starts out with this ordinary guy who has worked in Hollywood for a long time and is not particularly invested in any of these conspiratorial ways of looking at the world, having an accident. Having an accident at work and essentially losing his livelihood and going to a physical therapist who is helping him back to health. And the physical therapist introduces all these theories that there is secret society controlling Hollywood connected to reactivating his religious beliefs. And I think that that's just a very useful narrative to have or to keep in mind, that when people have traumatic experience of their livelihoods coming apart, of the world being broken, of feeling like they're thrown away, they don't have a place in the world anymore, which is explicitly how this stuntman talks about it. It is a human reaction to become open to explanations that make you feel powerful in the center of the world again. And that's what these kind of very improbable theories offer, is a sense that you have the master code, that you have the ability to see through everything. And it's actually very interesting in the film that it starts out where it's like, oh, these guys really worked in Hollywood. They're going to tell you these like secret things that they've seen, you know, hanging out with celebrities, the people pulling the strings, the actual agenda going on behind it. That seems like it's going to be the hook of the movie. But actually it's the reverse, that this guy has a accident and then gets introduced into the world of online conspiracy theories, and through the being familiar with those theories, then has this lens to look back on his experience. And he says, oh yeah, I could see how some of the art that I saw at people's apartments kind of looks like Luciferian in its imagery. So maybe there is something to all this stuff online. Conspiracy theory is a lens through which to look at your experience and give it meaning. And that is something that society is particularly open to at a moment when there's been huge traumatic disruptions and shifts, which is clearly the moment we're in right now.
I mean, it's fascinating because the way you're talking about conspiracy theories sounds a lot like art, in that people look to art for consolation in time of trouble. They look to art for the mirror that reflects back their experience, the lie that tells the truth.
You know, in a lot of ways, the way that people are looking at someone like Marina Abramović now is not that different than the way, I know this is an extreme comparison, but, you know, the kind of degenerate art way of looking at art. That during the Nazi period in Germany, you know, the modern art became this very useful prop for the National Socialists, for Hitler's regime to hold up and say, like, look at these degenerate figures who have corrupted culture and have brought this evil material that has destroyed our great cultural traditions. And in fact is a good index of like the artists we consider important from that time period are all included in the degenerate art show that was supposed to kind of hold these figures up to ridicule, because their artwork was unsettling. Their artwork was alienating. It serves as a convenient symbol of decadence and a cult elite who is out to get the ordinary person, or it can be framed in that kind of way.
Fascinating stuff, Ben. I think, you know, there's a lot to reflect on here, and it's kind of a sign of the times in a way. Well, that's it for this week's episode of The Art Angle. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. The Art Angle is produced by Tim Schneider and Caroline Goldstein and edited by Nick Long. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.